What's up, y'all? My name is JR, and for those of you who don't already know, I'm a huge movie and TV nerd. If you're new here, I appreciate you taking the time to check out my channel. I hope you'll consider sticking around and joining the film community I'm trying to build here on YouTube. So in today's video, I'm going to be breaking down the 8th episode in Season 3 of the Paramount hit TV show, Mayor of Kingstown. And just so you guys know, this video will contain spoilers, so if you haven't gotten around to watching the episode yet and you don't want to know anything that happens in it, you might want to exit this video now. And with that being said, no more wasting time. Let's get into it. So, the episode starts with a black SUV speeding through Kingstown, a masked man on a motorcycle following closely behind. Now, at the same time, we see Merle and his crew headed out into the garden area of the visitation area in the prison, with Kevin Jackson looking down on them from the ramparts. Now, once he walks by, Merle takes a razor out of his mouth and hands it to one of his guys, telling him that their cook is up and running and that they'll have a surplus soon. He goes on to state that the mayor is pushing Black back and that the Russians' time is ticking away. Now, one of the Norsemen, the Norseman that we've been seeing over the last several episodes, a tall, bald-headed guy, he asks if Mike's head is on straight. Merle tells him that Mike knows better than to try him, that if anybody crosses them, that there's no limit to the havoc that they'll wreak. He tells the guys that the mayor has shit to live for and that they have shit to die for. The Norseman remarks that he would die for Merle, and Merle responds, "Not soon enough, brother." Now at that point, we see Cole, Bunny's military guy, setting up on the train tracks across from the prison, putting together a long-range weapon as the SUV and the motorcycle continue to make their way towards their destination. Now, Cole has Kevin Jackson in his sights, and Kevin looks in his direction and he signals him by taking off his skull cap and simply nodding. Just then, the man on the motorcycle pulls up next to the prison, and he pulls the pin on 3 grenades, launching them over the prison walls. Now, the first explodes, killing the man standing nearby. The second explodes as the men start to scatter, and the third explodes near Merle, and he uses the man next to him as a human shield, falling with him on top of him to the ground. Now, Kevin Jackson calls Central and reports the attack. A nearby guard points his weapon at the man on the motorcycle as he begins to speed away. Cole sees him and shoots him, causing him to fall off the ramparts to his death. Cole then sends a shot through the window of the nest where Kevin Jackson is hiding before packing up his weapon and fleeing the scene. Now, Merle moves the dead body off of him, and he manages to rise, disoriented and stumbling, as another of his crew attempts to help him to his feet. Roll credits. So, the episode definitely started off with a bang, no pun intended. And I think that was a good move, mostly because we are getting to the point in the season where we need to start seeing things pick up. And the payoff from all the episodes of setup we've had to sit through at the beginning of the season, because the writers are trying to put together this really complex web of, the gangs in Kingstown kind of vying for position, jockeying for position, and thereby they're hiding a lot of what's actually going on from us, and they've been doing that for quite a while now. But there's only 2 episodes to go after this one, so it's time to, to get down to the get down, plain and simple, if you ask me. Anyway, next we see Mike driving through town, as he often is these days, and he gets a call from Carney, telling him about what just happened at the prison. Now, Carney asks Mike if he thinks it was Bunny. Mike asks who got targeted. Carney tells him that it was the Aryans, while they were on landscape duty. He tells Mike that the situation is not good and that he doesn't know who bought it, meaning who died. Mike tells Carney that is the question to answer and that it needs to be answered before he gets there. Carney asks how much time he has, and Mike tells him that he's on his way. And, look, we already know this was Bunny simply because of who was involved. The masked man on the motorcycle, we've seen these guys on a motorcycle before. Remember, at the end of season 2 when they jumped on Big Rob. Now, Cole, the shooter, we've seen helping Bunny stockpile weapons in previous episodes this season, with special attention paid to the grenades that he was able to procure, just like the grenades that were used in the attack on the prison. And finally, Kevin Jackson is Bunny's guy on the inside. So unlike the bus full of girls being killed at the beginning of last episode, which I gotta say, I'm almost certain was Bunny now, even though he kind of halfway tried to deny it. Remember, he said he didn't do it. He never said that he didn't do it, excuse me. He simply asked Mike if he thought that of him. And, we've known Bunny to kind of have a makeshift moral code, but, Bunny did say he's going to be the monster now, so I don't know. Now, what I will say is this kind of smells like exactly the kind of thing where the writers would try to point all of us in one direction, and then either next episode in the finale, we find out, psych, it was someone else. Bunny makes the most sense here, but I get the feeling that it's not Bunny just because the writers want to subvert expectations. But it doesn't make any sense for the story. But like I said, it makes sense that Bunny might even kill the Russian girls as payback for Rhonda's death. Plus we know for a fact that this was the Crips' thing to take out Aryan leadership. Now next we find Kareem sitting down at a table in a diner with his wife, and his phone keeps going off. Now, Vanessa remarks that he's missing a lot of calls, but Kareem tells her that what they're speaking about is important. Kareem asks Vanessa when it started. And, they're real vague about it, but, stay with me. Now, Vanessa replies that she's always been emotional. Kareem agrees, but then asks, after the riot? Vanessa tells him that she read things and that she heard things at school. Kareem then remarks that she also saw him at home. Vanessa leans in close to him and takes his hand and tells him that the situation is not because of him, but that she needs help. She goes on to tell Kareem that the school referred her to a therapist, but that it costs $300 an hour and that she needs to go twice a week. Now, Kareem seems taken aback by the news at first, but he then quickly agrees to do whatever she needs. Kareem's phone goes off again, and his wife tells him to answer it, but he puts the phone inside his jacket pocket instead, telling his wife that he's here with her right now. And this conversation is about their daughter. It's about the fact that she seems to be having problems dealing with all that has happened since the prison riot. Kareem feels responsible because she saw his bouts with PTSD, and she hasn't responded well to that. And I can't remember off the top of my head if Vanessa actually left Kareem at some point, but I figure she must be living separate from him because I would wonder why they're meeting in a diner instead of having this conversation at home. And, we have not seen Kareem with his wife, certainly not at his home all season. So I'm assuming that they must be living separate for whatever reason. Anyway, next we see Tracy at home in the kitchen preparing for work. Now Kyle walks in asking her why she let him sleep in. She tells him that he doesn't need to be up. Kyle asks if she ate anything and she tells him that she'll get something at work. He fills a thermos with coffee, telling her that she needs her rocket fuel. She thanks him as he makes faces at the kid. He then asks if he messed something up and doesn't know that he messed something up. Tracy tells him no, that she just didn't sleep well. She tells him that she'll see him later, but then he tells her that he has a shift later. She then tells him that she'll see him first thing tomorrow. Kyle says okay, and Tracy grabs the kid and she leaves. And I gotta be honest here. This story arc with Tracy has been poorly handled. I think there are ways the same arc could have been written without the confusing portrayal of Tracy's disposition. I think the writer should have had her tell the warden what she thought, but insist on anonymity instead of not, and then had the warden simply snitch on her, instead of having her in the warden's office beating her chest about not needing anonymity like she was a big dog, you know what I'm saying? Because now she's all shook because C.O. Breen ran up on her last episode. But it's pretty much what she asked for, trying to act like she was a G when she was clearly not built for this. And, I don't know, that's just me. Now, next, we see Mike arriving at the prison. He pulls out his phone as he walks through the police tape, meeting Stevie first. He asks him who's DOA. Stevie tells him that it was one guard shot through and through with a high-powered, high-caliber projectile, fired from a distance. Mike responds, effing snipers. He asks what prisoners went down. Stevie tells him that they're still figuring that out, that they're still waiting on the warden. And that's when Mike asks, kind of frustratingly, well, where's Kareem? And Stevie shrugs. Mike then asks the coroner, who happens to be passing by with the body bag, to open said body bag, and he looks upon one of the dead prisoners. Stevie then tells Mike that they have the shoot team trying to figure out the source of the fire. Mike asks where Ian is, and Stevie points up to the guard's nest above. Mike then calls out to Ian. Ian looks down, telling Mike, with a frustrating fashion that he's doing police work, as he uses a scope to try to determine the distance at which the guard was shot by the gunman. Mike calls him down. Ian tells him that he's busy. Mike tells him that it's going to get busier and that he needs to come down right now. So he does. Boy, Mike got pulled. Boy, he's just telling everybody what to do. He's not even law enforcement. Carney then shows up telling Mike that Merle is unconscious in the infirmary and that they may have to take him over to Kingstown General, that he'll fill him in when he knows more, for sure. Mike thanks him and Ian exits the prison, telling Mike that the guard was shot from 500 yards away. Mike remarks that it would take a military-grade weapon to do such a thing. Ian then asks which set has a sniper. Mike tells him that Bunny has access to military-grade weapons. Stevie asks how he knows, and Mike tells him that he's seen the weapons himself. He goes on to tell Ian that he's going to send him an address and that he wants KPD to get a warrant and hit the place. He then tells Ian to call him before he gets back in his car and he drives away. So here we have Mike for the second time in 2 episodes having KPD run up on Bunny and his interests. Now, last episode, he cut off Bunny's supply when KPD SWAT hit the Colombian drug shack, and now he's telling KPD where to find Bunny's weapons. And I know that Mike has vowed to be a little more egalitarian in how he handles each of the gangs. And we saw that Bunny has explained to Mike that the next time he sees him, it's going to pretty much be on sight. Chitty chitty bang bang. But I have no idea what Mike is doing right now. It's almost as if he's trying to get the Russians, the Aryans, and the Crips to basically cancel each other out. I can't say for sure just yet because the writers are being extra coy about all this as well, which I gotta say is getting quite irritating. But, I guess we'll find out by season's end, or at least we better. So next we see Tracy entering the infirmary at the women's prison as doctors and nurses are exiting the room. And Lena, one of the other nurses, approaches, telling Tracy that Cherry knotted up her sheet, meaning that she tried to hang herself. Now, Tracy asks how long it was before she was taken down, and Lena tells her that night shift wasn't specific and that they won't know if she's a vegetable until she wakes up one. She goes on to tell her that a bus is inbound before exiting the room. Now, Tracy goes over to Cherry and to take a closer look. And, Cherry's lying in the hospital bed unconscious with rope burns around her neck. And, look, this is kind of sad in some ways, but I got to admit I'm torn because I do kind of see this as some form of frontier justice for sure. But I definitely think that Cherry had to do some paying for what she did in season 1. Because, the Cherry that killed Sam was an absolute savage. Like, she gave 0 Fs, if you know what I mean. She did him in with malice in her heart for sure. And she absolutely showed no mercy, no remorse after the fact. And we all saw that much. Like, she was literally grinning when she was talking to Miriam about what she did. And while I certainly don't condone what the guards were apparently doing to her inside the women's prison in retaliation, but I do believe, and I'm just being honest, that if you live by the sword, you have to be prepared to die by it. So if this is the last we see of Cherry awake, I won't be pouring out any liquor for her, if you know what I mean. But I will say that her season arc was fairly interesting, and it was definitely worthy of bringing the character back after going a full season without her. Because I gotta say, when I first heard she was coming back, the first thought in my head was, what for? And my only question at this point is whether someone did this to her or she did this to herself. And, maybe we'll find out before season's end. Now, from there, we see Kyle eating at Don's diner. Now, Sarah, who was cleaning up behind the counter, asked Kyle if he can take his food to go and that she has something to do for her mom. Now, he busts his own table before asking Sarah if he can get some coffee to go. He asks, still doing everything for everyone, huh? And Sarah remarks that it beats loneliness, Prozac, and the price is right. I guess that's real. Kyle chuckles before asking Sarah how her mother is doing. And Sarah tells him that, she wants to sue her every time she walks through the door. but that she's happier in her own home. Kyle then sees her take a gun out from under the counter and put it in her purse. She tells him that she has a permit. Kyle tells her that it's okay, he's not worried. He asks if it's a Glock or a Smith & Wesson. She tells him that it's a Smith & Wesson, and that it's saved her and her daughter's life twice. And as the pair walks out, Kyle tells Sarah that he would feel better if Tracy carried the gun. And Sarah tells him that that'll be a hard convince. Now outside the diner, Sarah tells Kyle that it's worth a shot because Kingstown is an effing mess. Kyle asks, if you can't protect the ones you love, then what's the point? Sarah tells him that he does that every day before telling him to be safe as she walks to her car. Now, next we find Iris in her nice hotel room, as opposed to the mosey wosey she was in a few episodes ago that Mike had her in. But she's walking around in a robe and her underwear with breakfast sitting on the table, her phone sitting beside the tray, ringing off the hook. Now she finally answers it, and it's Mike asking if she's alone. Now she smartly responds, I'm not bringing people back to my hotel room, Mike. And Mike responds, well, then pick up your effing phone. He tells Iris that he's been calling. She tells him that she's been asleep. Mike remarks that it's noon. She tells him that she's a nocturnal creature now. He tells her to look out the window. She does, and she sees him sitting in his car in the parking lot. And Mike then asks how she feels about what happened at the river, that being the girls from last episode. She tells him that she's okay. He asks her if she wants out. She says no, that it wouldn't fix anything. She then tells Mike that she's not going to end up one of those girls. And then Mike tells her that as long as she's in this world, that she's absolutely going to be one of those girls. She tells Mike that Constantine doesn't treat her that way. At that moment, Mike notices Constantine's SUV pulling into the parking lot. He tells Iris, and she then tells Mike that he needs to leave right away. Mike asks what he's doing there, and Iris tells Mike that he's there to check on her, same as him. Iris hangs up the phone, and she rushes to get ready to receive him. Now, outside the hotel, Roman opens Constantine's door and he exits the vehicle as Mike starts his car and drives away. And inside the hotel room, we see Iris getting half dressed just as Constantine knocks on the door. She answers, telling Constantine that it's too early for bullshit. Constantine enters the room alone as Roman stands outside, and he closes the door behind him. He tells Iris that he had to see her and that he had horrible dreams. He apologizes for being short with her, and she tells him that she understands that he was trying to protect her. He remarks that protection can sometimes be controlling and that there may not be a difference, which I can kind of agree to. He goes on to explain that he realizes that seeing those poor girls may have conjured up some memories, and she tells him that she's okay. Now, he tells Iris that he wants her to leave Kingstown, which seems to surprise her. She asks if he wants her to go back to New York, and he tells her no, that he has new horizons in mind for her. He tells her that he'll buy her a life. She reminds him that he already did that once. He promises that this time he'll have no hand in it, that he'll essentially stake her, giving her what Milo never would have. He asks Iris to let him do this for her. She walks over to the table, telling Connie that the coffee is warm. She pours a cup, asking if he wants one. She whispers to him that she can't leave him, that she's not ready. He tells her not to say words she thinks that he wants to hear. She tells him that she's loyal to him. He looks at her, and then she tells him again. Now, at that moment, Constantine looks out of the large hotel room window, and he asks Iris what she thinks the source of the river just outside is, if he thinks its origins are foul, or if Kingstown is the thing that poisons it. And he tells Iris that he's offering her a cure, and he begs her to take it, but she shakes her head no in response, yet again. And here, I'll just have to say that the writers have spent way too much time going back and forth between Iris and Constantine, almost to the point where you can't really tell whose side she's on, his or Mike's. In fact, it's starting to feel like she's playing both sides right now. And initially, I was rooting for her to take Constantine down because, I kind of roll with Mike in this story. But lately, I got to admit that I'm torn because Constantine really seems to care for her a great deal. And he looks after her almost like a daughter, and he's even willing to let her go. So it's not like she's even being held captive by him like Milo was doing with her. So I got to ask myself why she would turn on him at this point. It would, just to make Mike happy, I don't know. Also, you know, both Constantine and Mike have been trying to get Iris to leave Kingstown for her own good, and for whatever reason, she just won't do it. And I don't understand at this point. I mean, I've told you guys that at this point, the only thing Iris really has left to do in this story is die. And maybe that'll happen, by the season finale. But for the last several episodes, it's just been meandering when it comes to Iris. Like the writers have no idea what to do with her now that she's not going to be Mike's love interest in this story. And, I personally thought the writer should have gotten Iris out of Kingstown at the end of season 1. But, here we are. Anyway, Mike shows up at the hospital, at the prison infirmary to check on Merle. And he asks Kino, the Hispanic, police detective who is standing guard, if he can have a minute alone with him. Now, Kino leaves and Mike welcomes Merle back to the land of the living, as he puts it. He tells him that he wanted to be the first face he saw after waking up. And Merle tells Mike that he wasn't the first face he saw, that he woke up to an immigrant standing at the edge of his bed. Boy, Merle, I guess this is what a racist would talk like, though. But God, dog. Mike tells Merle that Kino is a cop and that he was born in America. Now, Merle asks Mike what they're doing about the current situation. He reminds Mike that he told him to hit Bunny Washington and that he didn't do it. And I gotta say that when he asked Mike to hit Bunny Washington, I thought he was asking him to put him down. And so we get confirmation that that's indeed what he was asking him to do. Because in the next episode, Mike just kind of hit his drug operation. And I'm like, I don't think that's what Merle was saying. But, I kind of let it ride for that episode. But here we are now with Merle going, no, I told you to end, buddy, and you didn't do it. And so he blames Mike for his current circumstance. He goes on to tell Mike that he has to fix it and fast. And he tells Mike that he wants Bunny dead, along with everyone in his crew. Mike tells him that that's a lot of people. And Merle responds simply, F you. He tells Mike that he's failing him. And Mike tells Merle that he didn't fail him. He tells Merle that he failed himself. He goes on to tell Merle that KPD has confirmed that the ambush was the work of a military sniper with Army-issued grenades. He asks Merle if that sounds like Crips to him. He goes on to explain to Merle that this was a Russian hit and that he should stop wasting his time, energy, and resources on the wrong target. So here's Mike protecting Bunny again. He goes on to tell Merle that Constantine is going to drive a knife into Merle's back and devour him. That he's the prey now. Merle had a lot to say about predators in episodes past. But Merle coughs, hysterically before asking Mike what the plan is if he's the one calling it. And Mike tells Merle that he will end the Russian on his behalf. Merle asks about Bunny, and Mike tells him that he'll take care of Bunny too before he leaves the room. And see, I'm having a hard time piecing together what Mike's actual plan is here, unless it's, again, to get all the crews to turn on each other. But then does that include Bunny and the Crips as well? Why would he point Merle at the Russians when he knows it wasn't them who tried to kill him? And this move makes me even more certain that it was Bunny who flipped that bus into the river last episode, or at least that's the thing that makes the most sense in the story that we're being told. So now my biggest question becomes, is Mike still helping Bunny even after their perceived and rather public falling out? Even as his actions are in direct conflict with what Mike and thereby, Ian and Evelyn and most importantly, Iris would see as acceptable casualties of war. I really hope the writers pay this off right before the season is out, because the last few episodes have been head scratchers when you step back and take a deep, long look at them from far away. And it hasn't necessarily been a positive, if you ask me. I think, this is the writers just doing too much. Story has gotten so messy. But next we see Trey coming home from school. Now, as he arrives at his house, he sees Bunny's SUV parked outside along with some of his guys standing watch. Now, Trey walks into the house to find Bunny there talking with Ro. Bunny daps Trey up, remarking that he has not seen him in a while and that he's getting big. He takes him into the other room and he goes on to tell him that he heard that he was on the honor roll. He then asks if he's playing football, and Trey tells him that football isn't his thing. He tells Trey that he used to be a football, that he was a gridiron god, but that he doesn't have to because he's smart. He goes on to tell Trey that he's proud of him and that so is his dad, which seems to make Trey uncomfortable. And, Bunny notices and asks Trey if he wants to set his jaw, if he wants to square up, that being, do you want to fight, little man? Like, what's up? Trey says no, and Bunny tells him that his dad always has him on his mind, that he's in jail because of what he did for him and his mom. He goes on to explain to Trey that if he thinks Raphael chose something over him, that's not true, and that he needs to fight the urge to think so. He tells Trey that his dad needs to understand that Trey understands why he's not there, that he needs him to be a man for him. And Trey answers simply, I know. I will. Just then, Ro comes into the room with bags. Trey asks what they're for. Bunny tells him that while he's got his dad's back, that he will have theirs, and that he's going to move them someplace safer, and that it's only temporary. He then asks Trey if he's good, and Trey says yes. Now, this scene, and frankly, all the scenes involving Trey this season were also poorly constructed, or poorly directed at the very least. Because I don't understand why you would have Trey's character appear to be so angry at his father for being locked up, only to have him now say that everything's cool. There's no arc here. It's just busy work for a minor character with no real resolution to be had, or at least not yet. And I suppose there could be something of value salvaged within the last 2 episodes of the season, but I think there would have been far more value in having Trey be another problem for Bunny to solve rather than a simple time filler for a few episodes. I mean, I would just be much more compelled if Trey kind of was like, I hate my dad, like, screw him, like, and to have Bunny have to really do some really deep work to get Trey back on Raphael's side, and with Raphael not being able to do anything about it because he's incarcerated. And that would have just really been of much more value to the story if you're going to add his son as a main focus of the story in the first place. But that's just me. Now, on Connie's yacht, we see Constantine looking at pictures of the girls, asking out loud who benefits from their deaths. He goes on to state that all the girls are replaceable, much like they all are, meaning him and Roman and Iris and Alex and everyone, but that their death was no random act. Roman states that the Crips don't traffic women, but Constantine explains that despite that fact, they know that the Russians do. Now at that moment, Alex enters, telling Constantine that the Aryans are there for a re-up. Roman remarks that they don't have any meetings with the Aryans scheduled and that he'll get rid of them. But Constantine tells him to let them in instead. He tells Iris, who's sitting at the bar with her head on it, to go and sit with Alex on the other side of the room. The men enter and Constantine asks, what do I owe this honor? The men tell him that there was some static inside the prison and that they need to re-up. Constantine responds, what kind of static, I wonder? Almost as if he knows what's going on. They tell him that someone tried to kill Merle. Constantine asks if he survived. They tell him that he made it through. Constantine remarks that you can't kill a cockroach. One of the men impatiently asks if they can make an effing deal. And Constantine seems to be taken aback by the disrespect. And he asks the man, excuse me? And the Aryan responds, look, we just need to re-up. Constantine tells Roman to take the cash and measure out the product. He tells Merle's men that they can do it outside, but Constantine asks Roman why he's being so inhospitable, and he offers the men a drink, a martini. It's kind of early in the day for all that, but, okay. To toast to their fallen leader. One of the men remarks that he hasn't fallen, and Constantine responds, not today. He pours the drinks and tells both the men that when you enter a man's house, you're supposed to practice deference. He asked them if they know what that means, and one of the men responds, yeah, we should have called first. He tells the man that he must be the smart one. He then asks the men if they know what cause and effect means. He tells them that they cause him irritation and that they should avoid his irritation. He then asks what they think the effect could be before he shoots one of the men dead. Constantine tells the other man to lift up his friend and carry him out, explaining that their business is concluded, so, no drugs for you, right? And as the man carries his friend out, he asks Iris if she still wants to stay with him. So this scene is meant to confuse the issue even further. And this is why I think the writer should have made a little more clearer, even if it was just with a short scene or the like, exactly what Mike's plan is so that we, the audience, could follow along a little easier. Because I think it's one thing for Merle and Constantine and maybe even Bunny to not know what Mike is up to, but I think it's another thing altogether to confuse the hell out of the audience for multiple episodes, mind you, of your season as it pertains to what the hell's going on. If we had gotten a scene where Mike tells Ian, for example, that the plan is to get all the crews pointing their guns at each other in an effort to say, expel all of the groups from Kingstown for good, that would be something that would be worth watching come together. But that's not what we seem to have here. What we have instead has been, to this point at least, us trying to figure out whose side Mike's really on, while also trying to figure out whose side Iris is really on, while also trying to decipher whose side Bunny is actually on. And it's just becoming all too much at once, if you ask me. The writers here seem to be trying to prove just how smart they are to all of us right now, instead of focusing on telling a story that we can follow along with, and it's starting to become super duper frustrating. Anyway, next we see Kareem standing alone in the visiting area of the prison. We see Kevin standing alone in the visiting area of the prison, and Kareem arrives and tells him that he should take the day off tomorrow. Kevin tells him that he's all right, that he can work. Kareem remarks that the incident must have been hard for him to witness, and Kevin tells him it's how he would imagine war would be. Kareem remarks that there are days of boredom and then seconds of horror. He goes on to state that he heard Kevin reacted immediately. Kevin explains that he didn't react fast enough to save Thomas, that being the guard who was killed. He asks if Kevin had his statement for KPD, and Kevin tells him he did. He then asks Kevin to walk him through it, and Kevin appears confused, but Kareem tells him that he's his eyes and ears in the situation. He tells Kevin that he'll review the statements and the video footage, but that he wants to hear about the incident directly from him. Kevin tells Kareem that he will tell him exactly what he told KPD, and Kareem thanks him. He then tells Kevin that he can tell him if he wants to speak to anyone about what he witnessed, that DOC has counselors available, that there's no shame in asking for help. He tells him that anything that helps him process a barbaric act such as this one would be more than worth it. And Kevin replies simply, "Yes, Warden." Kevin then asks Kareem if he wants to go over his statement right then, and he says, "Yes, let's go to my office." And the pair leave. Now next we see Mike driving through a Kingstown neighborhood. He gets a call from Iris, telling him that Constantine just gunned down one of the Aryans on his boat. And Mike tells Iris, that this is a godsend. Iris tells Mike that Constantine is cracking, that he's doing coke for breakfast, that he's using heroin to sleep at night. Mike asks Iris how Constantine is with her. She tells him that she's still in his favor, but that he wants to send her away. Mike thinks it might be for the best, and Iris, tells Mike that the job isn't done, and she hangs up. And see, this is what I mean. Iris is being presented to us as a person who wants to take Constantine down, but when she's with him, you can see that she clearly still cares for him. And Iris is being confused about where her loyalty should lie is a nice trick for an episode or two, but here it's just been going on too long. She's telling Mike that Constantine's cracking up because he's doing coke for breakfast, but she's not telling Mike she's doing the coke right along with him. So, what are we talking about here? And the other thing is, like I already said, why won't Iris simply leave Kingstown? She can have a life, a decent life, the life she claims she's always wanted, to just be free. Both Mike and Constantine have offered her freedom, but she clearly wants to be in the shit for some reason, and I can't understand it unless the point is that she's lived in chaos for so long that she can't bear to live without it. This is why I think Iris will die at some point in this story, because there's only so many times you can get the offer to get out safely before the clock runs out on that notion. And I'll state again, the writers don't know what to do with Iris's character, and that's why she hasn't had any direction this season. She's just kind of all over the place. But next we see Merle's guys bringing him food. Merle tells him that he's not hungry, but the Norseman tells Merle that he's got news from outside. And Merle asks if bodies have started dropping. And the Norseman tells him that yeah, but it's the wrong ones. He tells him that some of their people went to the Russians for a re-up, and that he guesses that they weren't supposed to show up without an invite, that Constantine killed one of them and let the other go to tell the tale. Now Merle tells the Norseman to get the word out that it's time to set Constantine's river on fire. The Norseman leaves, taking the tray of food with him. And this is why Mike was saying that Constantine's actions were a godsend, because now It makes the lie that Mike told Merle earlier in the episode become the truth, without Mike having to do much of anything of note to make it so. And this will officially put the Russians and the Aryans at odds, and would have been really good for the plot if not for the fact that the Crips are involved in this whole mess as well, which has made this season feel way too crowded and the plot just way too convoluted at times. Look, I mean, sometimes less is more. That's just my 2 cents. Now, from there, we see Kevin Jackson leaving the prison. He gets a call from Bunny asking if he has to drop a bomb on the prison to get done what he needs to. And Kevin tells him that everything went down exactly the way it was supposed to, and Bunny rebukes Kevin's assessment of the situation, reminding him that Merle is not in the morgue, as per the plan. Kevin tells Bunny that Merle is segregated and that the soldiers are on high alert. He asks Bunny what he wants him to do, and Bunny tells him to just bide his time. He tells him to wait and see if he makes it, and to be ready if he does. He tells him that in the meantime, he wants him to mess up their signal. He explains that they're going to be most wanted on this one, and that he needs to confuse the issue. He goes on to ask Kevin if he's good with the warden. Kevin tells him that he is. Bunny tells Kevin to keep doing what he's doing, and Kevin agrees to do so. Now, next we find Mike in his office, a place we've been seeing him less and less as time goes on, and we did not see Rebecca this episode. But he gets a visit from Tracy. He lets her in and sits her down. He asks her if she wants coffee or a drink. She says she'll have both. She's doing down bad, right? He asks if everything's okay, and she tells Mike that she's back at the woman's prison. Mike remarks that he knows. She then tells Mike that she thinks that the COs are assaulting the female inmates. Now, Mike asks if they are assaulting the female inmates or if they're dating them. And Tracy tells Mike that the inmates are indeed being assaulted by their keepers and that she knows the difference. Mike tells Tracy that he had to ask because, both happened. Now, he asks which inmates. Tracy tells him that Cherry Maxwell is one of the victims. And Mike tells Tracy that he knows that name, that he knows what she did. And Tracy tells Mike that she was assaulted and that she actually gave birth, and then she nodded her sheet after they took her baby away. Mike tells Tracy that he doesn't have a ton of sympathy for Cherry. And Tracy tells Mike that Miriam was talking to Cherry after Sam's murder. Mike thinks about that and he chuckles. And she goes on to remind Mike that her mother never gave up on anyone, no matter what they were accused of or what they had done. And Mike agrees that his mother never gave up on anybody. Mike then asks Tracy, who she thinks did it. And she tells him that there's a CO, William Breen, that she suspects. Mike asks Tracy how she knows this, and she responds simply, I know. Mike tells Tracy that he's going to need more than that to act. Tracy reiterates that she knows it was him. Mike then stares at Tracy, and there's a brief silence, and it's tense. And Mike then asks Tracy if CO Breen has touched her. Now, Tracy doesn't answer, so Mike leans in closer, and he asks again. Tracy then asks if she brought, Mike then asks Tracy if she brought the situation to Kyle. And she begins to say no, but Mike interrupts her, telling her not to tell him. He then tells Tracy that he'll handle it. And I gotta say, I didn't like this particular decision as a narrative choice or as a personal one. If this were just about female inmates being assaulted by COs in prison, then fine. Mike's the mayor, he could get something done about that. But because CO Breen has already put hands on Tracy, she absolutely owed it to her husband to have a conversation about it before she went to Mike, maybe even instead of going to Mike. Kyle is her husband, and he should be the one making the call on this, and maybe he would have decided to bring Mike along for backup, but this was absolutely his fight and not Mike's. I just didn't like it. Also, I don't like how Tracy is so vague about everything because she seemed to have a lot to say before. Again, when she was talking to the warden, she was telling it all and she was being really clear about what was going on and about what she thought and what she didn't need. And so I'm like, why go to Mike at all if you're kind of trying to be coy, like you don't want to tell him what happened? Why would you go to him for help and then be all like, how do you know that this is going on? I just know. Right? Why wouldn't you tell Mike, hey, my man, he put hands on me? And that's how I know. And I want to be clear in saying that doesn't mean that CO Breen is assaulting, female prisoners. It might just mean that he knows who is and he was, one of the people that's willing to do something to kind of stop the person from being snitched on. But I digress. Anyway, Next, we see Ian at a gas station getting gas. And he's got a bunch of scratch offs that he's scratching off on the roof of his car, trying to win $1 million. You feel me? And Mike calls him and asks him where he is. Now, Ian tells him, and Mike tells him not to move. And he eventually shows up and tells Ian that they got to go and hurt somebody. And Ian asks Mike, since when you need help with that? And Mike tells him that he doesn't need help hurting the guy, but that he may need Ian to help stop him from hurting the guy. And he tells Ian to get in the car and the pair drive off together. And Ian just left his car at the gas station. I mean, that's, I'm like, man, I'll follow you. I ain't finna, it's Kingstown. I ain't finna just leave my ride, just post it. But okay. From there, we see Constantine on the Abigail, his boat, at night, preparing to lay down for the evening. And he takes his socks off as Roman prepares a shot for him. And by shot, I mean like a heroin needle. Now, he tells Connie that he made the call and that Iris won't have to worry about identification, relocation, that it's all very simple. Constantine remarks that he should have protected her better as Roman injects him between his toes. Junkie behavior, bro. Roman remarks that he'll protect her now. He laments the abominations that Milo put her through. Roman assures Constantine, though, that he's not Milo. Constantine tells Roman to pay whatever it costs to get the ball rolling and that he'll take nothing with him. Then he lays down on the bed on his back, staring up at the ceiling as Roman leaves the room. Now, at the bar, Iris sits, cutting cocaine with a credit card. She's on her junkie behavior too, bro, like for real. She takes a hit and offers Roman one. He takes a hit as well, and he tells Iris that if he were her, he would accept Constantine's offer to get her out of Kingstown. She shakes her head no, again, explaining that this is the first time she's felt in place in a long time. He asks, is that not more reason to get the F out? She asks Constantine why Constantine keeps bringing up Milo. And Roman explains that Tatiana worked for Milo, that she knew his end was near, and that she may have warned him. And I believe she did right off the top of my head. I think she did make a call to him towards the end of the season last season. Now, Iris explains that if Milo had known what was coming, that he would not have walked into that. Roman tells Iris that's why Milo is on Connie's mind so much. Iris asks if that's why he killed Tatiana before taking another hit. So you see, Iris is being asked to leave yet again, and yet again she's refusing. And I'm starting to be more and more concerned about Iris's well-being the further we get into this season. Like I said, it just feels like she's not long for this world. Like she may even be dead by season's end. Like everything that I'm seeing are little tricks that writers will do to set a character up to be taken out. And at this rate, she might take herself out with the drugs. Like, who knows? Like, she might be primed for a good old fashioned overdose. Who knows? I guess we'll have to stay tuned to find out. So next, we see Ian entering a crowded bar, and he looks around like he's looking for someone. And he approaches a man named Mullen and asks if he can point out C.O. Breen. Now, Mullen looks around and he tells Ian that he's the guy standing over by the jukebox. Ian approaches him and identifies himself. Then he asks if he knows why he's there. Breen tells him that he has no clue. Ian asks for a quick word outside off the record, and the pair leave the bar. Now, once outside, Mike rolls up on Breen hard and says simply, hey. And C.O. Breen asks who the F he is, and Mike responds telling him that he just wants to ask him a couple of questions. He asks where his uniform is, and Breen looks confused, telling Mike that, he doesn't wear his uniform outside of work. And then Mike asks if it's the uniform of a sexual assaulter. Breen asks, what the heck he's talking about. And Mike then beats the wheels off my man. And look, it was kind of surprising because I felt like this should have been a lot more of an even fight. Because absent Breen understanding that he was in danger from the jump. But, anyway, Mike, after he beats the crap out of him and, knocks him down to the ground, he walks up on him as he lay there, looking up at him with Ian standing there looking on. And he tells Breen that he's done working at the women's prison and that he's going to transfer to Anchor Bay, like immediately. Then he commences the beating one more again. And eventually Ian has to step in and stop him. Leave him, and they leave Breen laying there on the sidewalk, pretty much beaten to a pulp. Now, from there, we see Merle still in the prison infirmary, and now he's throwing up blood into a bedpan. So one has to wonder if maybe the explosions did some internal damage, and maybe Merle might not be long for this world either. And Bunny actually did get the job done, even though it didn't happen exactly the way he thought it would. Next, we see KPD SWAT searching Bunny's warehouse, finding absolutely nothing there. I mean, it looked like the thing was cleaned up with like toothbrushes. In fact, the whole place, like I said, is cleared out, almost as if Bunny knew that they were coming. Now, Big Rob complains that the search was a waste of time and resources. Kyle mentions that they must have gotten word that they were coming. Rob chuckles and responds, "Yeah, you think?" Kyle asks Rob why he's looking at him, and Rob tells him that he's not looking at him, that he's looking through him to his brother. Kyle tells Rob that they need a sidebar for the situation, and Rob tells him that there's nothing to sidebar, that it's rinse and repeats with this shit. Kyle reminds Rob that Mike gave them the tip. And Rob responds, "Yeah," and then he tips off Bunny Washington. Kyle tells Rob that he's out of line. Rob tells Kyle that Mike caters to Bunny and that he does drive-bys in broad daylight and dumps guns in the heights. Kyle reminds Rob that Bunny's tip saved his life. But Rob responds, "Oh yeah." Says who? Mike? He then goes on to state that he's not in the business of taking people's word for anything. Kyle reminds Rob that they're talking about the mayor. And Rob reports, "Yeah, of what?" He reminds Kyle that the Crips beat him half to death and that they shouldn't get points after the fact for telling Mike about it. Kyle tells Rob that he doesn't know shit about it. But Rob tells Kyle that he knows that the Crips almost widowed his wife and orphaned his son. Kyle tells Rob that he needs to stand down and that he's not himself right now. Rob tells Kyle to shut the F up, and then the two get into a physical altercation that has to be broken up by other SWAT members. Now, outside of the warehouse, Stevie calls Ian, who's riding in the car with Mike, and tells him that Bunny's warehouse was indeed empty. Now, Ian seems confused, asking Stevie, "What the heck do you mean?" Stevie repeats that the warehouse was empty. He then tells Ian to tell Mike that he needs to talk to Kyle. And, Mike, of course, being able to hear what's happening over the course of the call, interjects, and Stevie tells Mike that Rob and Kyle had words. Ian tells Stevie that he'll call him back. And Stevie hangs up. Now, Ian turns to Mike and asks him what's up. And Mike tells him that he gave him an address and that it's not his fault that the warehouse was empty. Now, Ian believes that Mike knew it would be empty. And Mike asks Ian why it matters. That now Bunny knows that KPD is after him, and that's all that matters. He tells him that the important thing is that Bunny's on the run, that he's not selling, and that that's a good thing. And Ian looks over at Mike, who seems to be smiling, like some kind of criminal mastermind. And Ian asks him what he's smiling about. And at that point, Mike straightens up his face as he continues driving down the street. Cut to black. Now, I do wonder if Bunny is indeed on the run. Because think about it, Raphael asked him to get his family out of Kingstown. So it could be a situation where Bunny was going to hit the Aryans on his way out. You feel me? The warehouse was cleaned out, not because Mike tipped off Bunny, but that Bunny was just on his way out of town, period. Right? And that may be, like I said, he went to Trey and Rose's house and he packed them up. So maybe they're all getting out of Dodge, just like Raphael asked. That could very well be what's going on here. So I'm not going to say for sure that Mike tipped him. And Mike literally says Bunny's on the run, in this last scene. So maybe, like I said, Mike knows that Bunny's getting out of Dodge. But this is what I mean about this season. I think there's been way too much time spent in limbo here, not knowing where the attacks were coming from at first, not knowing whose side Mike is on, not knowing much of anything. And look, like I've said before, there's value in keeping your cards close to the vest as a writer of television content, especially in a show like this one. But at some point, you've got to lay those cards down and let the other side play. And the writers haven't done much of that this season, and that's why I think this season has gone from one that I had a very strong interest in at the very beginning to one that's been a fairly frustrating watch the last couple of episodes. And I want to be clear that I reserve the right to change my mind after the last two episodes play themselves out, because I think finding out who killed Constantine's girls for sure is going to play a major part in how I feel about this season as a whole. That, along with who lives and who dies. But Mayor of Kingstown has kind of put himself in a situation where they absolutely need to knock the final 2 episodes completely out of the park to salvage my sincere interest in this show moving forward. I always tell people that when you conceive of a television show, that the story that you put together usually has a natural shelf life. Some of them are longer than others, some of them are shorter than others. And I've always thought this show had a relatively short shelf life based on its premise and the level of violence that said premise would require. And now that the heart of the show, that being the relationship between Mike and Bunny, has seemingly reached a point of fracture. And I want to be clear, I think that needed to happen before the show's end. Like I've always said to you guys, I think the show has to turn friend into foe in order for it to really reach its full potential. But I can honestly say that it's getting late in Kingstown. And I don't know if this will be the last season of the show or if it will get renewed for season 4. But with only 2 episodes to go, there feels like way too much to wrap up for there to be any sort of satisfaction once we get to the finish line on this one. And if that be the case, I may have to demote this show from absolute appointment viewing to finishing it when I have some time, because I've already invested in 3 seasons worth of my time in it. But what do you guys think? Did you enjoy the 8th episode of this season? What's your favorite storyline? Let me know in the comments. And for those of you that might be new to the channel, be sure to like and share this video. If you really like this content, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. That way you'll be notified whenever I drop a new video. Also, be sure to go and check out themaskscreenwriter.com for more television and film reviews and info on my upcoming film projects. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. I got screenplays to write. I'll catch y'all on the next video.